Welcome back to the TrailBLAZER Pod. I'm your host, Faye, and each week I bring you stories of Jewish women who are paving bold paths. Motherhood isn't always about baby showers and milestone photos. Sometimes it's grief, silence, and strength no one ever sees. Today's guest lived that reality, and instead of staying quiet, she built a movement. In this episode, she opens up about infertility and loss and how she turned her deepest pain into purpose. She didn't just survive it, she found it. I was supposed to have a baby, so no one else has to walk that road alone. This conversation is a powerful reminder that you can hold heartbreak in one hand and hope in the other. Let's dive in. Aimee, welcome to the TrailBLAZER Pod. Thanks so much for being here.
I'm thrilled and honored. Thank you so much.
The honor is mine. I've been wanting to talk to you for a while. I know scheduling, we had to wait a couple of months, but finally we get to do this. And I think it's just the perfect time of the year, the new year. I think this is like really important information for my audience is like young women, older women, just important conversation for us to have.
Yes, this is I see all different kinds of people who are in different stages of trying to build their family or dreaming about wanting to build a family. And I have the privilege of having these kinds of substantive conversations with
Yeah.
people and trying to hold them in a very trying time in their life. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I think what's special about you and your story is that your work is so reflective of the things you've gone through. And I think that really shows, like, I think when someone starts a business or organization, a non-for-profit, it's so much more meaningful when the person who created it has a personal connection to it, right? And so I want to start because of this. I want to start with you as a person, and I want to go all the way back to like who was Aimee as a little girl? Like what was life growing up?
Um, Okay. I didn't think we were going to go there, but sure. Amy, as a young child, had a lot of hopes and dreams about the way she thought her life was going to look like. I mean, I grew up as I was the oldest of three and very much the oldest child or the oldest daughter syndrome is now, in sort
Me
of pop
too.
culture, pop culture, that's the oldest daughter syndrome.
Yes.
I'm very much an oldest daughter. I was a high achiever, always very academic, loved I had a bunch of friends, but like elementary school was actually like a little bit hard for me socially.
Mhm.
And I didn't like those friendships, those deeper friendships really didn't start to happen until I was in high school. And I always dreamed of being a doctor. I from the time I was very little, it was either I was going to be a doctor or I was going to be an actress, actually. It was like sort of one or the other.
Oh,
Um, I'm not really sure how both of those connect, but in my mind at that point, it made sense.
yeah.
I was in a lot of school productions and so kind of like thought that was pretty cool, but also I really loved like the the interesting thing about medicine, I mean, there are many interesting things, but the
Mhm.
thing that fascinated me the most was the sort of mystery of all of it. That people come to you with a problem and you have to kind of take all of different pieces and talk to them and think about, what are their labs and what does their body look like and what are they telling you? And then try to come up with some kind of reason why they're feeling what they're feeling and then try to offer a solution to hopefully make it better. And I thought that was just super interesting and I love a challenge. And also, I really loved kids. And so I felt like going into pediatrics would be just the natural extension of that. So I was really fortunate. I went to college, but immediately got into medical school right after
Wow.
college. I was very, very lucky. And then got into my top choice of residency for pediatrics. And I really I mean, there's so many more things to say about childhood and whatever, but I'm obviously here for a reason. And I think that, the little girl in me was so excited to be a doctor and so excited to just start my life and, meet someone who I eventually did and get married. So I got married when I was 27. And I thought, life was great. And I was gonna sort of ride off into the sunset. And I
Yeah.
had my career and I had my husband and we'd have a bunch of kids and like all would be good. And it just didn't really go as planned, I guess you could
Yeah.
say.
Man plans, God laughs. It's like we always learn that over and over again in life. I feel like I'm curious, like, did you have somebody in your family or your life that was a doctor?
There was no one in my life. My parents weren't doctors. I didn't, none of my relatives were doctors. What I will say is this. My grandmother, my mother's mother, both of my mother's parents were Holocaust survivors,
Mhm.
and they very much instilled in me this deep belief and sort of mantra that the only thing that the Nazis couldn't take away from them as they were surviving through the Holocaust was their mind.
Mhm.
That
Oh,
education and getting as high of an education as possible so that you had a marketable skill that you could go anywhere and start over, that was a deep value that they instilled in
wow.
me, my grandmother specifically. And so I always knew I was heading towards higher education, but pediatrics for me, it was just, and medicine itself was just what I fell in love with.
Right. That makes so much sense. So you mentioned your grandparents being Holocaust survivors. I was going to ask you, how did Judaism play a role growing up?
I grew up in I would say, sort of a traditional conservative home in that we were very strongly affiliated. I even went to a modern Orthodox day school. Well, actually, I should go back and say I grew up in Lakewood, and
Oh,
Lakewood for those of the people in your audience who may know, Lakewood is sort of the bastion of lots of huge yeshivos, schools
yeah.
of of higher study in terms of Torah, and but my family was not religious. But at the
Wow.
time that I was growing up, Lakewood was still known as this town that had so many Torah great scholars, etc. But it was sort of those people in that community was centered around where the yeshivas were, and my family lived about a mile and a half away from that. So we were kind of, not in that system, so to speak. However, my mother's parents is who I just mentioned, who were the Holocaust survivors. One side was religious, was from before the war. And when they got married and came over to America, my understanding is that they kind of kept kosher and maybe kind of like kept Shabbos, but it waned over the years, to the point of where when my mother was born, my mother has one other sibling. My mother is the oldest. But when my mother was born and it was time for her to go to school, whatever, 5 years later, the local rabbi actually came to my grandparents' farm. They had a farm at the time, and he begged my grandparents to send her to modern Orthodox day school and said, like, this is what you need to do for continuity. And I know you've been through an incredibly awful experience that I could never even imagine. And I still think. And so my mother went to this day school, and then I went to this day school. My mother got married. They settled in Lakewood. My grandparents lived across the street from us. And so I grew up with a very strong Jewish identity, but not a specifically religious identity, with the exception of what was going on in school. There was this like really interesting dichotomy of like, I learned about all these things in school, but we didn't do any of the things at home. And I loved going
Wow.
to my friends' houses for Shabbos, but we didn't do any of that at home. I took ballet on Saturday, actually. Every Saturday morning, I took ballet.
Wow.
And I took it until I was 14. Um, and so, on the other hand, I was also very involved with NCSY, which is
Mm.
the Orthodox Union's, the OU's youth movement, went to a lot of Shabbatones and so on. And from a very young age, I can't exactly tell you when, I kind of had it in my head that when I got older, I was going to figure it out. Like,
Mm.
it felt like there was more to learn about keeping kosher, keeping Shabbos, and that I didn't really have the ability to do that living in my parents' house. Like, I learned pieces, going to this day school, but there was more. I knew there was more, and I wanted to figure it out when I got older. And so for me, that always meant, oh, when I go to college and I'm finally independent and I'll like be able to figure it out, so to speak. My parents actually, my grandparents, unfortunately, one after another over a course of a few years, were nifter, died at the end of elementary school and then into high school. And my parents moved out of Lakewood. Like, we moved out because there was nothing tethering them there
Right.
anymore. And the community was becoming much more religious and much larger. That religious community was becoming much, much larger. So we moved about 20 minutes north to a town called Manalapan, which is very heavily Jewish, but not religious really. Now it has a little bit. And I went to public school for the first time in my life. That was my sophomore year of high school. And I, at one point during my senior year, in the spring of my senior year, again, like going to NCSY Shabbatones and like looking at colleges and seeing which campuses, which universities had a really strong pre-med program and which ones also had a very strong Jewish community, because I knew that I wanted to grow.
Wow.
And there was like one point in my senior year where it kind of dawned on me. I remember it was March. I was like, nobody's actually forcing me to go out on Friday night if I don't want to. Like, I don't have to go out to the movies with my friends. I could stay home and keep Shabbos, whatever that means, all by myself, whatever, not turn on lights, not watch TV with the rest of my family. And so I did. And just like
Wow.
one random Friday night, I just stopped going out and I stopped doing the things, and everybody thought I like lost my marbles. And
Wow.
that was it. And I just, kept growing and growing, and in college kept growing and growing. And, here I am.
Wow. It sounds like from everything you're telling me, religious wise, medicine wise, like you were very like a very sure kid is what it sounds like to me. Like you had this like vision in your head and you're like, I'm gonna make this happen. Not sure yet how, not sure yet when, but like, I'm gonna make this happen for myself. And it might tie back a little bit to the oldest child syndrome because I'm a little bit like that. And you made it happen for yourself, which is so cool to see.
Oh, I love the fact that you specifically brought out that point, and it's something that, I mean, maybe we're having a therapy session now, so thank you for sharing that with me. But it is something that definitely has translated into other parts of my life. I mean,
Yeah.
even in starting this organization, like I have an idea and I
Yes.
just do it. Like I
Yeah.
just I there are also other areas where it happens the same. Like I'm a doer.
Yeah.
I don't sit and kind of ruminate. I'm like, I have an idea and then I go.
Yes. So I'm very similar and I'm working now, like not every idea has to be done the second you have it. So, this is a therapy session. So, I'm working on the other part where I'm like, you're allowed to, allowed to think about it. You're allowed to patience, right? The patience part.
Yes,
So, it's both sides of the coin there.
totally.
But yeah.
Totally.
So I'm not sure if this is the same. From what I understand from your post, the timeline is, you became a doctor, you became a pediatrician, and you were married, you were trying to have a family, and life didn't go as planned with that, right? So I'm curious what was it like taking care of babies and children while you're struggling with your having your own? Like I can't imagine like that dichotomy there is like so fascinating to me.
You hit on it exactly. Frankly, in the years in which I started to struggle mightily in a very profound way, where I was having miscarriage after
Yeah.
miscarriage after miscarriage after miscarriage, I quit my job.
Okay.
I walked away from medicine because I was in the field where I was taking care of people's babies. And at that point, now my story is longer. People can look at it at a different point. They can find it on our website. But the bulk of my fertility journey happened, all of those losses happened after I already had three children. So it
Mhm.
wasn't as if I had no one home to take care of, and I
Right.
wasn't filled with incredibly busy days and being grateful, because I was. And my older kids are amazing and delicious. And I was so incredibly blessed. And
Yeah.
I was so incredibly triggered being at work, knowing that my babies kept dying and
Yeah.
I had to take care of other people's babies who were living. And the piece that actually was the most painful was when it was a child that was born to a mother or a situation where I personally felt that the parents were unfit in some way, that
Mm.
maybe this was a teenage mother, maybe it was someone who was addicted to drugs or alcohol,
Yeah.
et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. it felt like the universe was just not fair,
Yeah.
and work was not an escape. It was painful, and that was when I walked away.
Wow. So just I think this is a good time to ask you because you're in this field now. If someone is sharing a story like this, what does someone in your position want to hear? Like, do you want to hear, I'm so sorry that you had to like I want to use this opportunity because I'm not sure what to say to that, right? Because I've never experienced some people shy away from having these conversations because we don't want to have to be faced with having to respond to something so difficult, right? So I just want to ask you now that you're professionally dealing with this, what's the correct response for somebody who's being, part of a conversation like this?
Maybe I'm actually going to start with, I'll tell you what's not the correct
Okay,
response.
that's helpful. Yeah.
What's not the right thing to say is, "Oh, well, you have other kids, so, like, don't worry."
Yeah.
Or, "Oh, like, you have no problem getting pregnant, you'll just get pregnant again and everything will be fine." Everything happens for a reason. I'm sure those babies were sick and they weren't meant to be here, and it's better that they died now than you having to deal with some other horrific thing later.
You've
I
had
mean,
someone say that to you?
oh, yeah.
Huh.
Oh, yeah.
Oh
Oh,
my
yeah.
gosh.
I mean, I could go on and on, but
Yeah.
I think the theme of the don't says is the don't try to offer an explanation to
Yeah.
people as to why their
Mhm.
pain or their situation happened. What you should say instead is exactly what you said to me. Oh my God, that is awful. That's horrific. I'm so sorry that you went through that, that you're going through that. How can I help? Do you want
Yeah.
me to bring you dinner? Do you want me to hold you and we'll just cry? Do you need me to just go away right now because you need alone time? Like, what you went
Yeah.
through is god awful, and no one should ever have to go through that. And I'm here for you.
Yeah. I think that's an important point. Like, it's okay to ask the person what they need. In fact, it's probably what they want to hear. And it makes the person also think, oh, what do I actually need right now? Right?
And the people often say, well, just let me know if you need anything. And so it's too big of a question.
Right.
It's too amorphous. Like, no, what do you mean if I need anything? Like, tell me, give me something concrete.
Yeah.
Like, do you want dinner tonight or tomorrow? I can bring you pizza or Chinese. Those are your choices, right?
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
do you want me to leave you alone or do you want me to come over and sit with you while you cry? Like,
Yeah.
give people choices. Don't give the amorphous, like, I'm here if you need me.
Right. Like the very open-ended, like
Yeah,
somebody in that position doesn't have the energy to deal with that kind of question.
100%.
Yeah. I think another point that you made is really important that somebody can have like so much blessing in their life and at the same time so much hurt and pain. And I think I just had Dr. Robin Koslowitz on. I don't know if you know her. And we were talking about this exact topic, just a little bit different. Like, how can I say I'm had trauma if somebody had such worse trauma, right? And it's like the comparing. She calls it the trauma poker.
Yep.
And I think it's just so beautiful how you put that. Like, I have three beautiful children. At the time I had three beautiful children at home and I was so blessed. Yet I was going through this incredible hard time in my life. And I think just giving yourself that grace, hopefully no one experiences it in that way, but giving yourself grace when you're going through hard times, that it doesn't take away from the good times. The good times don't take away from the bad times. Like, you're allowed to be human and feel both of those things at once. Like, I think that's just important for people to hear.
Absolutely. I mean, we're human beings, right?
Yeah.
I mean, even at the highest form of simcha, of joy, at our weddings, we break a glass because we
Mm.
remember the terribleness that happened to the Beis Hamikdash. Like, we are complicated human beings that can hold all of the things, and no one person is one dimensional, and no one situation is one dimensional. We all have lots of stuff, all of us.
Yeah, I love that example that you brought. So eventually you did have your twins, and you thought that like after you have your twins, you're gonna go back to medicine, and you didn't. Can you talk to me about what happened in that period?
And around the time they turned 2, I was kind of like starting to go crazy a little bit. Like, I was like, they're amazing and
Yeah.
wonderful, and I need more. Like my
Yeah, yeah.
brain is starting to turn to mush. And so I started interviewing again for pediatric jobs. And at the same time, my local shul, we did these programs on Shabbos afternoon specifically for women, and we talked about all kinds of different topics. People who had lost a spouse and
Mm.
postpartum depression and anxiety and all kinds of different things. And the next topic on the roster was infertility and pregnancy loss. And they had a speaker for infertility, but they reached out to me to talk about my experience with pregnancy loss. And I think that now we're talking about, so my twins are 11, almost 12. So this was 10 years ago,
Wow.
approximately 9.5, whatever, between
Yeah.
9 and 10 years ago. And what was interesting was that I, number one, people reached out to me because even though it was that long ago and we were not talking in an open way about fertility issues at
Yeah.
all at that point, but because those four losses that I spoke about earlier were all in the second trimester. And so everybody knew I was pregnant,
Yeah.
and then they knew I
You
wasn't
were.
pregnant.
Yeah.
So my story was out there. And I think just someone on the committee reached out and said, "Hey, do you want to talk?" And I was um, like, my husband is a very private person. I'm much more, I wouldn't say I'm a private person, but in general, I hadn't ever done anything like that
Yeah.
before. But once I thought about it, I realized that that could be a way that I could harness some of the pain that I had experienced, and that I could let other people who were going through similar things feel less alone. And I could use it also as an opportunity to share what this is really like so that
Yeah.
other people could be sensitized and be just more compassionate. And so I did. And you mean I was up the entire night the night before? I didn't eat, whatever. Like we could talk about all those things. I was so nervous. I was
I can
shaking like a leaf.
imagine.
And to a room of about 150 women, I gave this talk, and I almost felt like energized, really. And really just after that, someone reached out to me and said, there's some organization that does this kind of work with pregnancy loss. You should reach out to the person who runs it and speak to this one and speak to that one. So it kind of like, I really feel like Hashem sort of put this in my life, and I ended up taking this right turn because and I don't say left turn because it's not left, like it's not a
Right.
wrong turn, it's really a right turn. And I was launched into the nonprofit space, and I felt at that time, and I still feel this very much every single day now, that I have this unique combination of both life circumstances and education that I think enable me to be able to be effective and empathic and just to bring something new to the table in terms of the fertility organizations and experience. And it's that was the right turn, and that
Yeah.
was how it happened.
I always love hearing stories like that because in hindsight, I'm talking to you now. I know you as the woman who created I Was Supposed to Have a Baby, and it's like to hear the birth of it. It's like, of course you did this. It makes so much sense that you're the one that did this. But then you go back to those pieces, and it's like, how did you get there? It's so amazing that you actually were. And it sounds cheesy, but it's true. A lot of us don't have the strength, the courage, the vulnerability to put ourselves out there and create something from it. And thank God there's women like you who do. I mean, to see what it's grown, it's like I'm sure is unbelievable. But let's talk a little bit more, practicality. What what is I Was Supposed to Have a Baby, and what kind of support does it offer to people?
Thank you for your kind words, first of all. So we really, our main focus is emotional support for anyone in the Jewish community on any kind of fertility journey. And I always say that we don't have a mental health license, and don't ever intend to have a mental health license, but we sit adjacent to that space. We sit adjacent to therapy in that, I'm not going to dig back and try to uncover why you reacted the way you reacted, to X, Y, and Z
Yeah.
circumstances in your life. What we are here to do is hold your pain, whatever it is, and to help you through it through the lens of being Jewish, through the lens of the Jewish calendar, through the lens of our community, and through the lens of just wanting to be a mother, wanting to have a family. And what does that all mean? And how to hold you appropriately. The other big piece for me when I was starting, I was supposed to have a baby 6 years ago, was I wanted to create something that was distinctly unique from all of the other Jewish fertility
Mhm.
organizations out there, that they all do incredible work and they all need to continue to do their incredible work. So I wanted to create something where there was a gap, where
Yeah.
things and people that were not being served yet. And so I have the unique position of, because of my work, I actually have beautiful relationships with all of the Jewish fertility organizations. I actually
Wow.
run a WhatsApp group with all of the heads there, and we're constantly passing resources back and forth. There's someone in Europe who needs, a therapist. There's someone in Hong Kong who needs this. There's someone in
Wow.
Kansas who needs that. So we're constantly passing resources back and forth, but also on a personal level. And in I was supposed to have a baby, because we very much stay in our lane. I'm not providing medical guidance. I'm not providing financial assistance, and I'm not providing halachic guidance.
Mm.
So when people need all of those things, I send them out.
Right.
And then eventually or simultaneously, they always need to come back to me, because they all need emotional support, because this journey is not, you go off and you get an
Yeah.
answer and then 24 hours later you're fixed. This is
Right?
years
Yeah.
of someone's life.
Yeah.
And, look, what we offer is, it was important. It was important to me to be able to reach as many people as possible, the people who live in really beautiful, big, bustling Jewish communities, but also to reach the people in the corners of the earth that
Yeah.
really have no resources. So immediately we took advantage of social media, and we were digital, and we remain mostly digital in terms of the work that we do. And it's support and programming throughout a number of different social media platforms. We also have a podcast with
Yeah.
personal stories and professionals and all kinds of different people sharing and trying to give support in whatever way they can. We have, I think we're up to 13 now, monthly support groups on all
Wow.
different topics, run by people who are just so compassionate, some of whom have been through it themselves. And we have a lot of one-to-one offerings. I mean, I could go on. We do a lot of
Yeah.
trainings in communities. If God forbid, there's in one community just right now, there is a horrific situation that just happened, and we are brought into communities to consult, to sometimes give big programs, to train rabbis, clergy, doctors, etc. So there are lots
Yeah.
of pieces of this.
Yeah. So when I came across I was supposed to have a baby and I think you popped up on my LinkedIn and I obviously connected. I knew I wanted to have you on as a guest. And then as the months went by, some of the people I had on here and then also people I follow started posting like, I want to share something personal. And then they started sharing about their infertility journey. And every single time I was supposed to have a baby came up. And I'm like, wow, this woman and organization that I wanted to have on my podcast, I just clearly saw in real life the impact that it was having. And I was like, yep, she's coming on my podcast. I'm going to make it work some way or another. So something that you mentioned there is like through the lens of being a Jewish woman. And I want to ask you, do you think that it creates kind of like a different conversation, or maybe more of a difficult conversation, because so much of our life is centered around having a family and kids. It's almost like a core value of our communities. And I'm just curious if like there's more of a shame there, more of a taboo from your experience. Do you find that?
I think that kernel of what you're talking about right now is very much changing.
That's good.
And also it depends which community or even which country you're dealing with. So I'll give you a
Wow.
couple of examples. You know, I when I started, I was supposed to have a baby. At that point, there was already this woman named Dr. Jessica Zucker. Her handles all over social media, and the hashtag that she popularized was I had a miscarriage.
Mm.
And she was a New York Times reporter, and she's a psychologist or a therapist. I don't remember. Nobody come at me for this. Um, and she talked, wrote, did videos, interviews, etc., about her miscarriages.
Mhm.
And that at that time was totally revolutionary.
Wow.
And so she opened the door to having these just on high general conversations about fertility journeys. And then shortly thereafter, you started seeing like all these celebrities were talking about their fertility journeys and egg
Mhm.
freezing and, they're being successful or unsuccessful and so on. And so it started being more of a common topic to talk about. And I always say that in the Jewish community, we're kind of like 5 years behind everybody else. And then
Yeah.
in the Frum community, we're about 10 years
Yeah.
behind everybody else, right?
Yeah.
So in today's day and age, in most spaces in the Jewish community, most spaces are very open about having conversations about this, or if they're not, people aren't 100% open, it's at least top of mind for the community leaders, lay leaders, and
Mm.
clergy that this is something that people deal with. And they try to have programming and different kinds of pieces to make sure they're addressing what they know is happening in their own communities.
Right.
And there are still spaces, mainly in the right wing world in our community, but also in certain countries where it's just they're even further behind, where it is still taboo. There is still this shame when speaking about it. And I think that's just, to me, from my perspective, it's really just a matter of time that people start to talk about it more openly. I think in some of the yeshivish and Hasidish communities, that I think it's a little bit wrapped up in shidduchim, in matchmaking and in marriage prospects, that like
Yeah.
people think that, oh, if you have fertility issues, depending on what it is, then maybe you're not going to be able to have children, and then maybe you should, or whatever. Like I think
Yeah.
that
Yeah. Yeah.
some of it from that perspective is wrapped up in that. And also it's wrapped up in the fact that these are inherently private topics,
Yeah.
right? You're inviting people effectively into your bedroom, really, because it's not happening in a natural way, in the way that it typically does. And so therefore it's you're inviting people into your private life
Yeah.
when you have this kind of conversation. And so some people, I don't think, are ever going to be comfortable having this conversation on high, but then or even amongst themselves. But I think it's the burden falls on the community leaders and for those of us in these different positions to just even push more and more having these open kinds of conversations, so that when people are ready to reach out, even on a one-to-one basis, to get support or help or tell me which doctor to go to, that they're not afraid to pick up the phone or send an email.
Yeah. I think social media and the way you guys have leveraged social media, like somebody can be afraid to speak out about it or to even mention it, but they can be watching your videos and feeling a little bit
Yes.
less alone in what they're going through, right? What it is today, did you expect this, or is it kind of like a wild outcome?
Um, I I'm not a good fortune teller, so I will say that very
Yeah.
clearly. When I started, I was supposed to have a baby. I just thought, like, I'm just gonna like kind of put this out on Instagram, and
Yeah.
I hope there's like one person at the end of the day who reads this and says, "Oh, good, it's not only me.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Like maybe I'll send her a private message and maybe we can talk."
Yeah.
And that has just been multiplied by I, I don't know.
Yeah.
The numbers don't matter, but everything that has happened organically in the sense that more people kept reaching out. If more people reach out, it means I need more staff to be able to
Yeah.
help. And if I need more staff, that means I need to raise more money to be able to have more staff and more infrastructure. So, it's yes, let me actually say this. In the social media world, in the virtual spaces, there are ways that you can contain your information and can contain your growth, and there are ways that you can blow it up
Mhm.
and you can go viral. Like there are, I mean, I know people talk about, oh, it's like, how do I go viral? I just want to go viral. I just want to like have millions of people looking at my things. Actually, I have no desire for I was supposed to have a baby to go viral ever. Um,
Wow.
because we can't handle the inquiries that would come if we
Wow.
go viral.
Yeah.
Every time we do a crowdfunding campaign, we purposely push out lots of content, hopefully to entice people to donate, like to be clear, right?
Yeah.
And every single time we push content out in that way, we are overwhelmed with messages and
Wow.
calls and email. We are overwhelmed. And so, look, I can grow infinitely, but I need the systems
Yeah.
in place to grow. And so I purposely try to keep it contained so we can give people what they need on a personal basis.
Yeah. I love how you explained that. It's like I think it's also any person who create any business owner can take this advice. Everyone thinks the concept of blowing up, like you're saying, is like so attractive. Everyone wants millions of followers, and but nobody actually thinks what that practically does for them, their business, their organization. The way you just put that, like that's I think something that our generation needs to hear more often now. And it also goes back to like what's your mission here? Like is your mission to be known or is your mission to help the women that you're trying to help? And it's very clear that you're very clear with your mission, right? So I want to flip that on you a little bit. What's your goal? Like what's your 5-10 year goal for I was supposed to have a baby?
My goal is just to help as many people as we can. That
Yeah.
that's really my goal.
Yeah.
What that looks like, I don't know. Again, I'm I'm a terrible fortune teller. Um
It makes life more exciting though.
yeah, yeah.
Surprise.
Look, I mean, again, because I'm a dreamer. I have lots
Yeah.
of dreams and lots of things that I want to
Yeah.
do. I'm only limited. I mean, I keep saying this, but I'm only limited by how we can substantively support people.
Yeah.
And so I'm very again, I'm not going to do something unless I know that we can handle what will come out of it. And
Yeah.
so it's all limited by funding. If I had someone write me, a blank check tomorrow, I know exactly what I would do with it. And
Yeah.
I know exactly the number of people and what skill set I would hire. I know exactly what I would do.
Yeah.
In the meantime, we're doing what we can.
Yeah. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. So now I asked you earlier what somebody listening to your story would say to you. I want to ask you now, in hindsight, the organization you've created, the women you've helped, what would you say to you when you were going through those miscarriages?
You know what the problem is? I know what you want me to say. You want me to say that I would have said to myself, "Don't worry, it's all going to be fine," and you're
No.
going to be no. Okay, okay.
No.
So,
Look,
so
here
fine.
someone told me I asked this
Yeah,
question to someone and she's like, "Look, if I would have said what I said to my now, what I know now, what I would have said that to my 18-year-old self, I wouldn't be able to process it. I wouldn't be able to metabolize because I wasn't ready to hear." And so I'm expecting more that kind of answer than everything's going to be okay because I don't you don't come across as the type of
yeah.
person.
Oh no,
So,
I'm totally not. I'm
right.
totally not the everything's going to be okay. Thank you.
Exactly.
You pegged me perfectly. Um, I I don't know really what I would say, frankly,
Yeah, it's a good answer.
because that person who was crying hysterically most nights, who could barely get out of bed, was a half functional mother, wife, human being. I was in a very deep, dark place for a very, very long time. My friend Rebecca, she was the person that was also having many second trimester losses
Mm,
at the same time that I was. And so
wow.
she was my person. She said to me, you know, you're also going to be okay, and I promise you're also going to have a baby. And I said, Rebecca, how do you know that? You can't know that. Like, stop telling me that. So I don't really know what I would say, because
Yeah.
it there is nothing that I could say to that version of me that would find any comfort, frankly.
Yeah. So that's why I asked you the question. I actually I'm glad I asked you and I'm glad this is your answer because I often I have when you listen to podcasts and you're like, if they were asking me that, what would I say, right? And I'm like, how do people have answers to these questions? Because I would never know what I would say to my 18-year-old self. I like how you challenged me in the beginning. You're like, I know what you want me to say. Appreciate that. But yeah, no, I'm glad that I asked that and I'm grateful that you answered honestly because I think that's just it's raw. Like, I don't know if people expect that. People expect you to be like, yeah, everything's gonna be okay, honey. No,
Right,
not
right.
always, right? Last question, and I'm sad this is my last question because I'm really enjoying talking to you. I ask all my guests what being a trailblazer means to you.
I'm not really sure how to answer that question. I I'm just a person who has this constellation of things that are part of my life, that are in my life, that have enabled me to be able to take those horrific experiences and change the course of my life, and just take that right turn. um
Yeah.
I really don't consider myself a trailblazer. I created what I needed for myself. And
Yeah.
if somebody thinks that that's trailblazing, okay.
Let me tell you why I do think you are, because it goes back to what I was saying earlier. Most of us would not take that step to actually put it into action, even if it's for you.
I'm taking it, but I'm fine.
Talking about I was supposed to have a baby is important. It's crucial. People need to know that this is a resource, but I'm also glad that we got to talk a little bit more about who you are. I think it's like really just explains how I was supposed to have a baby came about and like why it's different than other organizations, right? And like the why for you is very clear to me. Like your mission is very clear, it's very authentic, very genuine, and I think that really comes across when you listen to your story. So thank you so much.
Thank you.